Welcome to David's Stories. Today we follow Michael Brown, a recovered addict humiliated at his son's wedding who exposes his son's deceitful bride and her fake family. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly videos uncovering lies and triumphs. Share your thoughts below. Let's start the story. The chandelier's golden light cascaded over the ballroom, bathing the wedding guests in a glow that screamed wealth and perfection. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter rippled like a carefully orchestrated symphony, and the air smelled of roses and ambition. I stood at the edge of the room, my calloused hands tucked into the pockets of a suit that, while well-fitted, felt like a borrowed skin in this world of excess. I'm Michael Caine, a man who clawed his way out of the abyss of addiction to build a $22 million empire of hope recovery centers that save lives. 12 years sober, I thought I'd faced every kind of demon. But tonight, at my son Ethan's wedding, a new kind of darkness revealed itself. A darkness named Sophia. She stood at the head table radiant, in a gown that shimmered like moonlight on a frozen lake, her smile a blade disguised as a promise. Sophia, my son's bride, raised her champagne flute, her voice slicing through the chatter. To family, she began, her eyes scanning the crowd before locking onto mine. To those who rise above their complications. A murmur rippled through the 150 guests. Some carry burdens past they'd rather bury. Like Ethan's father Michael, who's overcome, well, let's just call it a shadowed history. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We don't judge, of course, but standards matter, and some belong at the edges of society, not its heart. The room fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of her words. Low class, damaged goods. She didn't say it outright, but the venom in her tone painted the picture clearly. I felt the sting sharp and deliberate, as if she'd plunged a dagger into my chest in front of everyone I loved. Ethan, my son, sat frozen, his face pale, his hands gripping the table. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Sophia and me, waiting for my reaction. But I've learned something in 12 years of fighting my demons: never let the first blow break you. I smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips, and raised my glass in return. To truth, I said, my voice steady. May it always find its way. The crowd didn't know it yet, but Sophia had just ignited a fuse. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Beneath the surface of this glittering wedding secrets were stirring secrets I'd uncovered in the shadows of her so-called perfect life. Her family, those polished California aristocrats who'd flown in for the occasion, weren't what they seemed. They were actors hired at $1,500 a day to play the part of old money elite. And Sophia herself, the woman who'd just branded me a relic of shame, was hiding her own darkness. A purse full of prescription bottles, a web of lies so intricate it would unravel her world. By the time this night was over, her carefully constructed facade would crumble, and the truth would burn brighter than her diamond tiara. It started 6 months ago when Ethan brought Sophia to our family dinner. I'd walked into his apartment with a bouquet of lilies, a gesture of warmth for the woman who'd captured my son's heart. But Sophia recoiled as I offered them her manicured hand, pulling back as if my touch carried a curse. "Ethan didn't mention you'd be here," she said, her voice cold as winter frost. She didn't take the flowers. I set them on the counter, my jaw tight, and met her gaze. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, raked over my work boots, my clean but unpretentious shirt. "Ethan says you work in recovery," she asked, the word dripping with disdain as if I scrubbed floors for a living. "Recovery centers," I corrected, keeping my tone even. "I run 8 of them across Arizona. We help people rebuild their lives." She nodded, but her expression said I was nothing more than a reformed failure. Over the months, the signs grew clearer. Sophia avoided me, clutching her purse like a shield whenever I was near. She'd vanish into another room, leaving a trail of excuses. When we dined together, she insisted on separate checks, as if my money was tainted. Worst of all, she was changing Ethan. My son, 5 years sober himself, stopped our Sunday calls. When we did speak, he was distant, his voice heavy with her influence. Dad maybe toned down the recovery talk around her, he said once, his words a knife. She thinks it's heavy. Heavy. The word echoed in my mind as I stood in my office at New Dawn Recovery, watching clients walk to group therapy through the window. Real people fighting real battles. And yet Sophia and her mysterious family, old money Californians she claimed were too exclusive to meet, thought my work, my life was beneath them. I'd never seen a photo of her parents, never heard a concrete detail about their supposed real estate empire. When I asked Ethan about them, he'd shrug. They're private, Dad. Sophia says it's gauche to talk money. Private or hiding something. The final spark came 3 weeks before the wedding. I was helping Ethan move furniture in his apartment when I overheard Sophia on the phone in the kitchen. "No, Mother, you don't understand," she hissed. "His father has a past. Drugs. I know it's embarrassing. But what can I do?" "Ethan's attached." Her voice dropped, but I caught the rest. "We'll keep him at a distance after the wedding. Table 12 near the service entrance. He won't be a problem." Table 12. The words burned into me. I'd spent years in recovery learning to spot lies, to recognize the way people hide their shame behind cruelty. Sophia's words weren't just snobbery, they were a mask. And masks always slip. I started digging that night. A casual Google search of her family's last name, Hartwell, paired with California real estate, turned up nothing. No business records, no social media, no trace of the wealth she flaunted. Her family's online presence was pristine, too pristine, like a stage set built yesterday. Most people would let it go, swallow the insult, sit at table 12 and smile. But I'm not most people. 12 years of sobriety taught me that silence breeds rot. If Sophia was hiding something, I'd find it. And if it could hurt my son, I'd tear it apart. As I stood in that ballroom, her toast still echoing, I felt the weight of what was coming. The guests sipped their champagne, oblivious to the storm brewing. Sophia thought she'd humiliated me, but she'd only awakened something stronger, a resolve forged in the fires of my past. I wasn't just a father protecting his son. I was a man who'd learned to wield truth like a weapon. Tonight, that weapon would strike. And when it did, Sophia's perfect world would shatter, revealing a labyrinth of deception that would leave everyone, including me, questioning what was real. The scent of roasted garlic and rosemary lingered in Ethan's apartment, a modest space, with hardwood floors and a view of the Scottsdale skyline that flickered like a distant promise. I stood in the doorway, clutching a bouquet of lilies, their petals soft against my calloused fingers. I'd driven an hour to be here, to meet the woman who'd stolen my son's heart. Ethan, my boy. 5 years sober and climbing the ranks at an engineering firm, had been talking about Sophia for months. His voice carried a lightness I hadn't heard since before his mother Claire passed. I wanted to believe in that lightness. But the moment I stepped into the room, the air shifted like a storm gathering on a clear day. Sophia sat on the couch, her posture perfect, her auburn hair cascading over a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent in the early days of recovery. She looked up as Ethan introduced us, her green eyes sharp like a predator sizing up prey. "Dad, this is Sophia," Ethan said, his smile nervous but hopeful. "Sophia, my father, Michael Kane." I extended the lilies, a gesture of goodwill. "For you," I said, keeping my voice warm. But Sophia's hand pulled back a subtle flinch, as if my touch might taint her. "Ethan didn't tell me you were coming," she said. Her tone clipped, her gaze flicking to the flowers and then away. She didn't take them. I set them on the counter, feeling a prickle of unease. It wasn't just her words. It was the way she looked at me, her eyes scanning my clean but simple button-down, my work boots scuffed from years on recovery center floors. I wasn't dressed for her world, and she made sure I knew it. "Nice to meet you," I said, forcing a smile. "Ethan's told me a lot about you." "Oh," she replied, her lips curving into a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He mentioned you work in construction recovery," I corrected, keeping my tone steady. "I run New Dawn Recovery Centers, 8 locations across Arizona. We help people rebuild their lives after addiction." She nodded, a faint tilt of her head, but her expression screamed dismissal. "That's important work," she said. The word important laced with condescension, as if I were a janitor cleaning up society's messes. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between us. "Sophia's family is in real estate," he said quickly, trying to bridge the gap. "Big players in California. Old money." "Fascinating," I said, leaning against the counter. "What kind of real estate, commercial, residential?" Sophia's smile tightened. "A bit of everything," she said vaguely. "They're very private about business. It's not something we discuss openly." Her hand rested on her purse, a sleek leather thing that she pulled closer as if I might pry into it. The gesture was small, but it stuck with me. People don't clutch their belongings like that unless they're hiding something or afraid of being seen. Dinner was a dance of polite tension. Sophia dominated the conversation, steering it towards safe topics: art galleries, wine tastings, the kind of life that sparkled on the surface. But every time I mentioned my work stories of clients who'd fought their way back from the edge, she changed the subject. "Tell me about your engineering projects, Ethan," she'd say, or "Have you been to the new French bistro downtown?" It was subtle but deliberate. She didn't want to hear about recovery, not mine, not anyone's. As I drove home that night, the lilies still on Ethan's counter haunted me. I saw Claire's face in my mind, her gentle smile as she'd coax me through my darkest days. "You're more than your mistakes, Michael," she'd say. 12 years sober. 8 recovery centers. Hundreds of employees. Thousands of lives changed yet. To Sophia, I was a stain on her perfect canvas. I couldn't shake the feeling that her disdain wasn't just about class. It was personal, like she saw something in me that threatened her. Over the next few months, the cracks in her facade grew wider. Ethan's calls, once a Sunday ritual, where we'd talk about his job, his sobriety, his dreams, became sporadic. When we did speak, his voice was strained, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't name. "Sophia's just particular," he said once when I asked why she seemed to avoid me. "Her family's private. They don't like airing personal stuff. Personal stuff like what I asked, standing in my office at New Dawn, the hum of group therapy sessions filtering through the walls." "You know," Ethan said, hesitating, "your recovery. My recovery. She says it's heavy. Her family doesn't talk about things like that." I gripped the phone, my knuckles whitening. "Heavy," I repeated. "Ethan, you're 5 years sober. I'm 12. "That's not heavy, it's a victory." "I know, Dad," he said quickly. She thinks it's better to focus on the future, not the past." I looked out my window, watching a young client, Marcus, walk toward a therapy session, his shoulders hunched, but his steps steady. Marcus had been clean for 6 months, fighting not just addiction, but the shame his girlfriend's family piled on him. I'd told him, "Your past is part of your story, not your whole story." Now my own son was asking me to hide mine. It wasn't just Sophia's influence, it was a wedge driven deep between us. Her family was another mystery. 6 months into their relationship, and I'd never met them. No photos, no stories, just vague references to old money and exclusive circles in California. When I pressed Ethan for details, he'd shrug. "They're in investments, real estate. Sophia says they're too busy for casual visits. Too busy or non-existent." I started noticing other oddities. Sophia's social media was a curated gallery of perfection: yacht trips, gala dinners, designer dresses. But her family was conspicuously absent. No tagged parents, no candid shots of holiday gatherings, just her posing alone or with Ethan in a world that felt staged. The unease grew a quiet hum in the back of my mind. I'd spent years in recovery, learning to trust my instincts, to spot the signs of someone hiding from themselves. Sophia's avoidance, her guarded purse, her quick deflections. They weren't just snobbery. They were tells. I'd seen them in clients, the way they'd dodge questions, shift blame, build walls to keep their secrets safe. But what was Sophia hiding? And why did it feel like she was pulling Ethan into her shadows? The final piece fell into place 3 weeks before the wedding. I was at Ethan's apartment helping him move a heavy oak dresser to make room for Sophia's things. The place was a mess of boxes, a symbol of the life they were building together. Sophia was in the kitchen, her voice low but sharp, talking on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the walls were thin and her words carried like a blade. "No, Mother, you don't understand," she said, her tone laced with frustration. "His father has a past. Drugs, rehab, the whole mess. I know it's embarrassing, but Ethan's attached and I can't do much about it now." A pause. "We'll keep him at a distance after the wedding. I've made sure he's at table 12 near the service entrance. He won't be a problem." Table 12, near the service entrance. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze, the dresser half lifted, my breath catching. Ethan was on the other side, oblivious, his focus on the furniture. But I heard everything. Sophia wasn't just dismissing me, she was orchestrating my erasure, relegating me to the margins of my son's life. I set the dresser down, my hands trembling not with anger, but with clarity. 12 years of recovery had taught me to recognize shame as a weapon, and Sophia was wielding it with precision. I didn't confront her then. I've learned that timing is everything. Instead, I played the part of the oblivious father, laughing with Ethan as we rearranged the room. But inside, a fire was kindling. Sophia's words weren't just cruel, they were calculated. And calculation meant she had something to protect. Something she didn't want me to see. That night I sat in my study, the glow of my laptop casting shadows on the walls. I typed Hartwell, California real estate into the search bar. Nothing. No business records, no news articles, no trace of the empire Sophia claimed her family owned. I tried variations. Hartwell Investments, Hartwell Properties. Still nothing. Her family's social media accounts were pristine, too new, like they'd been created yesterday. No history, no depth, just a glossy surface. I leaned back, my mind racing. Most people would let it slide, chalk it up to a snobbish future daughter-in-law. But I'm not most people. I've spent years peeling back layers of lies, my own, my clients', the world's. If Sophia was hiding something, I'd find it. And if it could hurt Ethan, I'd burn it to the ground. I thought of Claire, my late wife, whose voice still guided me. "Don't let anyone make you forget how far you've come," she'd said. Her hand warm in mine as cancer stole her away. I'd built New Dawn from nothing, turned my pain into purpose. 8 centers, 200 employees, thousands of lives saved. Yet Sophia saw me as a relic, a man to be hidden at table 12. I closed my laptop. The decision made. I'd dig deeper, not out of spite, but because Ethan deserved the truth. And because I'd learned one thing in recovery secrets: fester in silence. And I was done staying quiet. The next morning, I called Dr. Sarah Voss, my business partner at New Dawn. Sarah was a force, Stanford-trained, sharp as a scalpel, with a network that stretched across the country. "Sarah," I said, pacing my office, "I need a favor. Discreet. Can you look into someone for me?" "Who?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. "Sophia Hartwell, Ethan's fiancée, and her family. They're supposed to be California royalty, but something's off." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Give me a week. If there's anything to find, I'll find it." Her confidence was a lifeline. I hung up, feeling the weight of what I was doing. Digging into Sophia's life could fracture my relationship with Ethan. He loved her, believed in her. But love blinds, and I'd seen too many lives destroyed by secrets to let this go. Over the next few days, I played my part. I smiled at Ethan's texts about wedding plans, nodded through Sophia's curt emails about seating arrangements. But every interaction with her sharpened my suspicions. She'd disappear into the bedroom with her purse whenever I visited, as if I might steal it. At dinners, she'd insist on separate checks, her eyes avoiding mine. Once, when I mentioned a client who'd just celebrated a year sober, she cut me off. "Can we talk about something less depressing?" she said, her smile brittle. Ethan laughed it off, but I saw the strain in his eyes. She was pulling him away from me, from his own story. And it wasn't just control, it was fear. I started noticing patterns. Sophia's stories about her family were always vague. A father who developed properties, a mother who collected rare jewelry, aunts and uncles who summered in exclusive places. But when I asked for specifics, names, locations, projects, she'd pivot her words, smooth but empty. "They're private," she'd say, or, "It's complicated." Complicated. That's what addicts say when they're hiding. I'd heard it 1,000 times in group therapy, seen it in the mirror during my own dark days. One evening I sat with Marcus, my 24-year-old client, in a quiet corner of New Dawn. He was struggling, his voice low as he confessed his fear. "My girlfriend's parents found out about my past," he said. "They think I'm not good enough for her. What if they make her choose?" I leaned forward, my voice firm. "Your past is your strength, Marcus. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you. Hold your head high." He nodded, but his eyes were haunted. I saw myself in him, saw Ethan, saw every client who'd ever fought to reclaim their worth. And I saw Sophia standing in the way of that fight, not just for me, but for my son. The night before Sarah was due to report back, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house, the silence heavy with memories of Claire. Her photo sat on the mantel, her eyes steady and kind. "Protect him, Michael," she'd said before she died, "even when it's hard." I touched the frame, my resolve hardening. Sophia's disdain wasn't just personal, it was a threat. To Ethan, to the life we'd built, to the truth we'd fought for. I didn't know what Sarah would find, but I knew one thing. Table 12 wasn't where I belonged. It was time to step into the light. The desert night was quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your skin, heavy with secrets. I sat in my truck outside the Desert Ridge Country Club, the engine off, the windows cracked just enough to let the cool Arizona air slip in. Through the tinted glass, I could see the glow of the rehearsal dinner inside, champagne flutes, catching the light, elegant figures moving like actors in a play. And that's exactly what they were, I was beginning to suspect. Actors. Hired to wear the masks of Sophia's family. The thought sent a chill down my spine, not because it was shocking, but because it felt so possible. 12 years in recovery had taught me to trust my instincts, to spot the cracks in someone's story. Sophia's story wasn't just cracked, it was a house of cards trembling in the wind. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles pale in the moonlight. 3 weeks ago, I'd overheard Sophia's phone call, her voice sharp, as she relegated me to table 12 near the service entrance, like a stain to be hidden. That moment had lit a fuse, and now I was here on the edge of a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to face. If I walked into that rehearsal dinner and confronted what I suspected, I risked everything: my relationship with Ethan, the fragile trust we'd rebuilt after years of battling our demons together. But if I stayed silent, I'd be betraying something deeper, the promise I'd made to Claire to protect our son no matter the cost. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, snapping me out of my thoughts. A text from Dr. Sarah Voss, my business partner, and the sharpest mind I knew. "Michael, you asked me to look into something discreetly. Call me. We need to talk." The words glowed on the screen, each one a weight. Sarah had been digging into Sophia's family for 3 weeks, using her Stanford connections and her knack for finding what others missed. If she was texting instead of calling, it meant she'd found something big. Something that could change everything. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the call button. What if Sarah's findings confirmed my worst fears? What if Sophia's family wasn't just private but a fabrication? And what if her contempt for me, for my past, my recovery, wasn't just snobbery, but a mirror reflecting her own hidden shame? I'd seen it before in group therapy sessions at New Dawn. The loudest voices against addiction often belonged to those fighting their own battles, projecting their guilt onto others. Sophia's venom felt too sharp, too personal to be just prejudice. It felt like deflection. Another buzz. A text from Ethan this time. "Dad, Where are you? Dinner starts in 10 minutes. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, my face etched with lines from a life hard lived. 51 years old, 12 years sober, 8 recovery centers, thousands of lives changed. I wasn't the man Sophia painted me to be, a relic, a failure, but none of that mattered if I didn't stand up for it. I thought of Claire, her voice soft but firm in my memory. Don't let anyone make you forget how far you've come. I dialed Sarah. Michael. Thank God she answered, her voice low, urgent. Listen, you were right to be suspicious. Sophia's family, they're not who they claim to be. My heart thudded against my ribs. What do you mean, not who they claim to be? I mean they don't exist. Not the way she's described them. The real estate empire, the old money, the California connections, it's all fabricated. I leaned back, the leather seat creaking under me. Fabricated? How I'm looking at casting agency contracts right now, Sarah said, her words clipped precise. Sophia's entire family, mother, father, aunts, uncle, cousin, are actors from Prestige Acting Solutions in Los Angeles, hired to play the part of the Hartwell family for Ethan's wedding. The world tilted. Actors. Not just private, not just elusive, but a lie spun from whole cloth. Are you sure? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Positive. I've got emails, payment records, even character briefs. They've been paid $500 a day each, Michael, for 3 months of preparation. That's not wedding weekend money. That's relationship money. I closed my eyes, the pieces snapping together. 3 months. Sophia hadn't just hired actors for the wedding, she'd built an entire facade to fool Ethan from the start. Who's paying them? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The payments come from an account registered to S. Morrison Financial Services, Sarah said. But here's the kicker, S. Morrison is a shell company. No physical address, no employees, no legitimate business activity, just a front. S. Morrison. Sophia's last name. My blood ran cold. So Sophia's bankrolling this whole charade. Looks like it, Sarah said. And it's not just the actors. I found something else, something worse. But I don't want to say it over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow before the wedding? Tomorrow? I glanced at the glowing windows of the country club. Sarah, I'm outside the rehearsal dinner right now. Her family's in there. I'm about to meet them. A pause. Be careful, Michael. These people are playing a role, but Sophia's the one pulling the strings. If she's gone to these lengths, she's hiding more than a fake family. I hung up, my mind racing. Actors. A shell company. A woman who'd built her relationship with my son on a foundation of lies. The stakes had shifted, no longer just about my wounded pride or Sophia's disdain. This was about Ethan, about protecting him from a truth that could shatter him. But there was something else too, a nagging suspicion that Sophia's hatred for my past wasn't just classism. It felt like fear, like she saw something in me that mirrored her own darkness. I thought of my sponsor, Jerry, his gravelly voice echoing from years ago. Michael, the worst thing about addiction isn't the drugs. It's letting people make you feel like you deserve less than respect. If I walked into that dinner and played the part Sophia had scripted for me, the humbled father relegated to the shadows, I'd be sending a message. To Ethan, that it was okay for his future wife to disrespect his father. To myself, that 12 years of sobriety meant nothing if someone like Sophia deemed it so. To every client at New Dawn, that shame was a life sentence. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. But I needed to be smart. Accusing Sophia without proof would make me look like a bitter father trying to sabotage his son's happiness. I needed evidence, something concrete, to expose the cracks in her story. And tonight at the rehearsal dinner, I'd start testing her carefully constructed lie. I stepped out of the truck, the desert air sharp against my skin. The country club loomed ahead, its marble facade glowing under the stars. Inside, Sophia's family was waiting, 6 actors playing the roles of parents, aunts, an uncle, a cousin. I'd meet them, shake their hands, look into their eyes, and I'd watch for the tells, the pauses, the glances, the moments when their masks slipped. I'd spent years reading people learning the language of deception in group therapy rooms. If these people were actors, I'd know. And if Sophia was hiding something bigger, I'd find it. My phone buzzed again as I reached the entrance. Another text from Sarah. "One more thing, Michael. I found pharmacy records linked to Sophia. 4 doctors, multiple prescriptions. Call me after the dinner." My stomach dropped. Pharmacy records. I didn't need Sarah to spell it out. I'd seen the pattern before. Doctor shopping, multiple prescriptions, a secret buried in a purse she guarded like a vault. Sophia, the woman who'd called my recovery a shadowed history, was hiding her own addiction. The irony was almost poetic, but it wasn't funny. It was dangerous. I slipped the phone into my pocket and straightened my jacket. The rehearsal dinner was about to begin, and with it the first act of a drama Sophia didn't know she'd scripted. I wasn't just walking into a room full of strangers. I was stepping into a battlefield, armed with suspicion and a promise to protect my son. The door swung open, and the light spilled out, pulling me into the heart of Sophia's illusion. The Desert Ridge Country Club shimmered like a mirage, its marble columns and crystal chandeliers casting an illusion of timeless grandeur. I stepped through the doors of the rehearsal dinner, the air thick with the scent of lavender and expensive perfume. The room buzzed with the hum of polite conversation glasses clinking and the soft strains of a string quartet. But beneath the polished surface, I felt the undercurrent of something unsteady, like a stage set, waiting to collapse. Sophia's family was here, 6 strangers playing the roles of parents, aunts, an uncle, and a cousin. Tonight I'd test their performance, probing for the cracks I knew were there. 12 years of reading people in recovery had taught me one thing: lies can't hold up under scrutiny. And I was done playing the fool. I adjusted my jacket, the same one I'd worn to every significant moment since Claire's funeral, and scanned the room. The guests were a sea of tailored suits and glittering gowns. Their smiles practiced their laughter a touch too loud. Sophia stood near the head table, radiant in a cream-colored dress that clung to her like a second skin. She was laughing with a man in his 60s. Silver hair swept back his suit, screaming old money. Her father, I presumed. Next to him, a woman with an elegant chignon and a diamond necklace caught the light, her mother. The others, aunts, an uncle, a cousin, mingled with the ease of seasoned performers, but their eyes darted too often, their gestures too calculated. Actors, every one of them. I could feel it in my bones. Ethan caught my eye from across the room, waving me over. His tuxedo was crisp, his smile genuine but strained. "Dad, you made it," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Come meet Sophia's family. They flew in this morning." I nodded, keeping my expression warm. "Wouldn't miss it, son." But as I followed him, my pulse quickened. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a chess game, and I was about to make my first move. Sophia's father was the first to greet me. He extended a hand, his grip firm, his smile polished. "Richard Hartwell," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Wonderful to finally meet Ethan's father." "Michael Caine," I replied, shaking his hand. His palm was soft, unscarred by labor, but his eyes flickered just for a moment when I held his gaze. "Ethan says you're in real estate." "Commercial development, mostly." Richard's smile didn't waver, but there was a pause, a heartbeat too long. "Oh, various regions," he said, waving a hand vaguely. "Northern California primarily. We keep a low profile." "Interesting," I said, leaning in slightly. "My recovery centers work with a lot of commercial developers. Maybe we know some of the same people." "What's your company called?" Another pause, this one heavier. "Hartwell Properties," he said, his voice a touch tighter. "We're fairly boutique." "Hartwell Properties," I repeated, committing it to memory. "How long have you been in business?" 23 years this fall, he said, the number precise, but delivered with a flicker of unease. He shifted, glancing toward Sophia, who was watching us from across the room. "Impressive," I said, smiling. "I'll have to look you up." Always good to connect with folks in the industry. His nod was curt, and he excused himself to greet another guest. Strike one. A man with 23 years in real estate doesn't flinch at basic questions unless he's hiding something. I moved to Sophia's mother, Margaret, who stood by a table adorned with orchids, her jewelry gleaming under the chandelier light. Beautiful necklace, I said, gesturing to the diamond pendant at her throat. Family heirloom. She touched it reflexively, her fingers lingering. Thank you, she said, her voice cultured but rehearsed. It's been in the family for generations. Really, I said, tilting my head. It looks like Tiffany. Recent collection. Maybe the Celeste. I'd spent enough time with Claire in jewelry stores to recognize the hallmark of a new piece. This wasn't vintage, it was fresh off the showroom floor. Her smile faltered just for a second. Oh no, she said quickly. It's much older. European, actually. European, I echoed, leaning closer to inspect the necklace. There it was, the tiny Tiffany hallmark, unmistakable to anyone who'd paid attention. Gorgeous piece. Your family has excellent taste. She excused herself with a nervous laugh, her hand still clutching the pendant. Strike two. The rest of the family didn't fare much better. The uncle, a robust man in his 50s, claimed to be a wine collector but mispronounced Bordeaux as Bordeaux. The aunt, draped in a shawl that screamed Hampton's wealth, said she summered there but couldn't name a single town, East Hampton, Southampton, nothing. The cousin, a young man with a Yale sweatshirt, faltered when I asked about his residential college. Oh, you know, one of the main ones, he said, his eyes darting to Sophia. Strike 3, 4, 5. They were good, I'd give them that. But good isn't perfect, and perfect is what Sophia needed them to be. I saved her for last. She was standing by the bar, her posture regal, her eyes scanning the room like a queen surveying her court. I approached, a glass of sparkling water in hand, and smiled. Your family seems wonderful, I said, keeping my tone light. Very accomplished. They are? She replied, her voice smooth but guarded. We're very proud of our legacy. Your father mentioned Hartwell Properties, I said, watching her closely. I looked them up on my phone earlier. Interesting that there's no website. Her jaw tightened, a flicker of tension crossing her face. They're very private, she said. Old school. They don't need a website to do business. Of course, I said, nodding. And your mother's jewelry collection is impressive. That Tiffany necklace especially. The Celeste collection, right? Came out last year. Her face went pale, her fingers tightening around her glass. It's not Tiffany, she said, her voice sharp. You must be mistaken. Oh, I'm sure it is, I said, keeping my smile steady. Claire used to drag me to Tiffany's all the time. I recognize that setting. Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me, she said, her voice clipped. I need to powder my nose. She walked away, her heels clicking, but I saw the tremor in her hands. She was rattled. Good. Ethan noticed our exchange from across the room. He approached, his brow furrowed. Dad, is everything okay? You look like you're interrogating people. Just getting to know your future in-laws, I said, keeping my tone casual. But I looked at him. Really looked at him. 5 years sober, a good job, a heart that wanted to believe in love. But there was a shadow in his eyes, a doubt he couldn't name. Ethan, can I ask you something? How well do you actually know Sophia's family? He frowned. What do you mean? Have you spent time with them? Visited their house? Met their friends? They're busy, he said, his voice defensive. Private. Sophia says they prefer to keep family and business separate. How did you meet her? I asked, pressing gently. At a conference, he said. She was representing her family's foundation, the Hartwell Foundation. Charity work. Another piece of the puzzle. And you've never been to California to see them? Sophia says it's cleaner this way, he said, but his voice wavered. Less complicated. Cleaner. Or harder to verify. I nodded, letting the moment pass. But Sophia returned from the bathroom, her composure restored, her eyes colder than before. She walked straight to me, her voice low but sharp. "Michael, I think we need to clear the air. About what I asked, keeping my expression neutral. About your attitude toward my family?" she said, her words slicing through the hum of the room. "You're being suspicious, and frankly, it's inappropriate." Other guests were starting to notice their conversations faltering. "Suspicious of what?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Of people who come from a different background than you," she said, her voice rising. "Educated, established, successful." "You think I'm not successful?" I asked, my tone still even. "I think you're threatened," she said, stepping closer, "by people who didn't have to claw their way up from nothing." The room was quiet now, the string quartet the only sound. Ethan stepped forward, his face flushed. "Sophia, that's enough." But she wasn't done. "No, Ethan," she said, turning to him. "This needs to be said. Your father resents that my family has standards, that we don't think his past makes him qualified to judge us." "Judge you how?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the heat rising in my chest. "By acting like we're somehow fake," she said, her eyes blazing. "Just because we have class." I took a slow breath. 12 years of recovery keeping me grounded. Angry responses only prove the other person's point. "I never said you were fake," I said. "I asked about your father's business, your mother's jewelry. Normal conversation. Normal for someone looking for problems." She snapped, her breath coming fast now. The room was a gallery of wide eyes and whispered murmurs. Sophia was unraveling her perfect mask, slipping, and I saw it, guilt. Not just defensiveness, but the raw, jagged edge of someone hiding a truth too big to hold. The dinner ended in a haze of forced smiles and stilted conversation. Guests tried to pretend nothing had happened, but the tension hung like smoke. Ethan walked me to my truck, his face a mix of frustration and confusion. "Dad, what was that about?" "Your fiancée doesn't like questions," I said, unlocking the door. "She's protective of her family," he said, running a hand through his hair. "They value their privacy." "Ethan," I said, turning to face him. "In 12 years of recovery, I've learned one thing. People who get angry at simple questions usually have something to hide." "Are you seriously psychoanalyzing my relationship?" he asked, his voice sharp. "I'm trying to look out for my son," I said, my tone soft but firm. "In 24 hours, you're marrying someone whose family you've never visited, whose business you've never seen, whose friends you've never met. Doesn't that seem unusual?" "It seems private," he said, but his eyes flickered with doubt. "Not everyone broadcasts their life. There's a difference between private and secretive," I said. He shook his head, his shoulders tense. "I can't do this tonight, Dad. The wedding's tomorrow. Can we just get through it without drama?" I hugged him, feeling the distance between us like a chasm. "I love you, Ethan," I said. "Always." As I drove home, my phone buzzed with messages. The first was from Sarah. "Michael, I have more information. Meet me early tomorrow before the wedding." The second was from Frank Davis, a private investigator I'd worked with before on theft issues at New Dawn. "Got your message. Very interesting case. Can we talk?" The third was from Ethan. "Dad, I'm sorry about tonight. I love you. I just want tomorrow to be perfect." I pulled into my driveway, the messages glowing in the dark. Sarah had found something big. Frank had something interesting. And Ethan, my son, was caught in a web of lies he couldn't see. I sat there the desert night, pressing in, and thought of Jerry, my sponsor. "The difference between being clean and being in recovery is action," he'd said. "Recovery means doing the right thing even when it's hard." Tomorrow I'd walk into that wedding with my head high. Not for me, but for Ethan, for Claire, for every client who'd ever trusted me to help them face the truth. Sophia's house of cards was about to fall, and I'd be the one to pull the first thread. The Desert Ridge Country Club was a cathedral of opulence on the day of Ethan's wedding. its ballroom awash in golden light, roses cascading from every table like a declaration of eternal spring. The air hummed with anticipation, the clink of crystal, and the murmur of 150 guests blending into a symphony of celebration. I stood at the back of the room near table 12, where Sophia had relegated me close enough to hear the clatter of dishes from the service entrance, far enough to be invisible to her perfect world. My black suit, the one I'd worn to Claire's funeral, and every milestone since, felt like armor now. I wasn't here to blend in. I was here to tear down a lie. The ceremony had been flawless, a performance so polished it could have been scripted for a Hollywood screen. Ethan stood at the altar, his tuxedo sharp, his smile radiant with hope. Sophia, in a gown that shimmered like liquid starlight, floated down the aisle, her beauty a weapon that disarmed the room. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, I held my silence, my jaw tight. This wasn't the moment. Some battles require patience, and I'd learned patience in the long, brutal years of recovery. But the reception was different. The reception was where masks slipped, where toasts became confessions, where truths could no longer hide. I watched from table 12, my sparkling water untouched, as the guests settled into their seats. Sophia's family moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her father Richard shaking hands with the confidence of a seasoned politician, her mother Margaret air-kissing acquaintances with an elegance that screamed old money. The aunts, uncle, and cousin played their parts flawlessly, but I saw what others missed, the way they introduced themselves repeatedly to the same people, the way their smiles faltered when conversations dug too deep. They were actors hired at $1,500 a day to sell Sophia's lie, and they were good, but not good enough. Dinner was served at 7, the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation filling the room. I ate my chicken, my eyes never leaving Sophia's family. They checked their phones too often, their glances darting to Sophia as if awaiting cues. She sat at the head table, her laughter bright but brittle, her hand never straying far from her purse. That purse, sleek leather, guarded like a vault, held secrets I was certain would unravel her. Dr. Sarah Voss's text from that morning burned in my mind. Pharmacy records, Michael. 4 doctors, 7 pharmacies, 8 months of prescription shopping. OxyContin, Percocet, Adderall. Sophia, the woman who'd branded me a failure for my past, was drowning in her own addiction. At 8, the toasts began. Ethan's best man, a lanky engineer named Tom, gave a heartfelt speech about friendship and love, his voice cracking with emotion. The crowd applauded warmly. Then Richard, Sophia's father, stood, his silver hair catching the light. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone rich with authority. "When my daughter Sophia first told us about Ethan, we knew she'd found someone special. A young man any family would be proud to welcome." Polite applause rippled through the room. I wondered how many hours he'd rehearsed that line, how many notes Sophia had given him to perfect the role of proud patriarch. "Our family," he continued, "has always valued integrity, hard work, and respect. We're delighted Sophia has found those qualities in Ethan." More applause. The irony was a blade in my chest, but I kept my face neutral, my hands folded on the table. Then Sophia stood, her champagne flute raised, her smile, a mask of triumph. "Thank you all for being here on our special day," she said, her voice clear, commanding. "Ethan and I are so grateful for your love and support." She paused, her eyes sweeping the room, lingering on me for a fraction too long. "I especially want to thank both our families for bringing us together. Marriage is about joining 2 families, not just 2 people." The crowd nodded, charmed, but then her tone shifted, a subtle edge creeping in. "Of course not all families are the same," she said. "Some have histories they're proud of. Others have complications they'd rather forget." A murmur ran through the guests, the air tightening. "Ethan's father, Michael, for example, has overcome significant challenges. Addiction specifically." The room went still, the hum of the air conditioning louder than the silence. My hands clenched under the table, but I kept my face calm. Ethan's face flushed red, his eyes darting to me mortified. Sophia continued, her voice dripping with false compassion. We don't judge people for their mistakes. Everyone deserves a second chance. But there are standards families like ours maintain, expectations about who we associate with socially. Ethan stood, his voice low but urgent. Sophia, maybe we should— No, honey, she interrupted, her smile sharp. This needs to be said. Your father has made inappropriate comments about my family, questioning our background, our business, our legitimacy. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. So let me make something crystal clear to everyone here. My family built their success through 3 generations of hard work, education, and ethical business practices. We didn't have to claw our way up from rock bottom because we never fell to rock bottom in the first place. The silence was deafening. Guests shifted in their seats, some clutching their glasses, others whispering to their neighbors. Sophia wasn't done. We understand not everyone has been so fortunate, she said, her voice rising, and we're willing to overlook certain deficiencies for Ethan's sake. But we will not tolerate disrespect from people who should be grateful just to be included in civilized society. My hands shook, not with anger but with the effort to stay calm. 12 years of recovery had taught me that rage plays into the hands of those who want to break you. Sophia raised her glass, her smile triumphant. To new beginnings, high standards, and the importance of knowing your place in the world. Half the room raised their glasses, hesitant, awkward. The other half sat frozen, stunned by the venom in her words. Ethan's face was a mask of humiliation, his hands gripping the table. Sophia had just used my recovery, the thing I'd fought hardest, for the thing I was most proud of, as a weapon to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. But she'd made a mistake. She'd pushed too far, and I was ready. I saw Sarah Voss enter through a side door, her manila folder tucked under her arm. She caught my eye and nodded, a signal that the moment had come. I stood slowly, the room turning to watch me. Sophia was still standing, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her hand, her triumph fading as she saw the resolve in my eyes. Sophia, I said, my voice carrying across the room, steady and clear. That was quite a speech. Thank you, she said. Her tone defiant, but her eyes flickered with unease. Very revealing, I said, stepping forward. The guests leaned in, sensing the shift. I'd like to propose a toast of my own, if you don't mind. Ethan shook his head, his eyes pleading, but I was already moving toward the head table. Actually, I continued, I'd like to toast your family, specifically your remarkable family business. Richard shifted in his seat, his polished facade cracking. Margaret's hand flew to her necklace, her fingers trembling. The other family members exchanged glances, their masks slipping. I pulled out my phone, my heart steady despite the storm brewing. Dr. Voss, I said, turning to Sarah, who was now at my side. Would you mind joining us? I believe you have some information that might interest our guests. Sarah stepped forward, her presence commanding, her folder, a weapon of truth. The room was silent, every eye on her. Sophia's glass trembled, her face pale. Good evening, Sarah began, her voice calm but cutting. I'm Dr. Sarah Voss, Michael's business partner at New Dawn Recovery Centers. 3 weeks ago, Michael asked me to look into Sophia's family background. As a medical professional with access to certain databases and networks, I found something intriguing. Sophia's voice was sharp, desperate. This is highly inappropriate. This is our wedding reception. You're right, I said, my tone even. A wedding should celebrate the union of 2 families. So let's talk about families. I nodded to Sarah, who opened her folder with deliberate precision. Sophia's family. Sarah said the Hartwells are presented as California real estate tycoons. Old money, very private. But here's the thing, they don't exist. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Sarah pulled out a photograph. This is Richard Hartwell, or rather Robert Patterson, a character actor from Prestige Acting Solutions in Los Angeles. He specializes in distinguished gentleman roles for corporate videos and dinner theater. The room erupted in whispers. Richard's face went white, his hands gripping the table. Sarah held up another photo. And this is Margaret Hartwell, or Linda Foster, also from Prestige. Her specialty is elegant society matron. Margaret's hand flew to her throat, her necklace glinting under the lights. Sarah continued, her voice unrelenting. The entire Hartwell family are professional actors hired for this wedding. I have their contracts here, $1,500 per day per actor for 3 months of preparation. Total cost, approximately $75,000. The whispers grew louder, guests pulling out their phones, no doubt Googling Prestige acting solutions. Sophia found her voice, her tone shrill. This is insane. These people are lying. Are they? Sarah asked, pulling out her phone. Mr. Hartwell, what's your company's address in California? Richard stammered, his eyes darting to Sophia. We don't give out business addresses to strangers. How about your company's phone number? Sarah pressed. Silence. Or the name of a single project your development company has completed? More silence. Sarah turned to Margaret. Mrs. Hartwell, tell us about your family's jewelry collection. That Tiffany necklace specifically. It's not Tiffany, Margaret said, her voice shaking. Sarah held up a receipt. According to this, it was purchased from Tiffany's Beverly Hills 3 days ago for $8,000, charged to a credit card registered to S. Morrison Financial Services. The room was buzzing now, a hive of shock and curiosity. Ethan stood, his face a mask of confusion and pain. Sophia, what is this? What's going on? It's a misunderstanding, Sophia said, her voice cracking. These people are confused. Are they? Sarah said, holding up an email thread. This is correspondence between you and Prestige Acting Solutions dated 4 months ago. Subject line, Extended Family Portrayal Services. It details the need for 6 actors to play a wealthy California family for social events, complete with a background story of real estate wealth, old money, and privacy. The fake uncle stood abruptly, heading for the exit. Leaving so soon, I called after him. He didn't look back. The cousin followed, then the aunts, their heels clicking in a desperate retreat. Within moments, 4 of Sophia's family had fled, leaving only Richard and Margaret frozen like deer in headlights. This is impossible, Sophia said, her voice trembling. You're making this up. That's when Frank Davis appeared at the back of the room. I'd texted him during Sarah's presentation, knowing his evidence would be the final blow. Frank, I called perfect timing. Did you bring those pharmacy records we discussed? Frank walked forward, his weathered face, grim, a folder in hand. Sophia Morrison, he said, his voice steady. I'm Frank Davis, licensed private investigator. I've been researching your background for the past week. You have no right. Sophia snapped, her hands shaking. Actually, I do, Frank said, opening his folder. Prescription drug databases are part of public health monitoring, and you've been busy. He began reading. Dr. Martinez at Phoenix Pain Management, 60 OxyContin for chronic back pain. Dr. Stevens at Scottsdale Family Medicine, 40 Percocet for dental surgery recovery. Dr. Thompson at Mesa Medical Center, 90 Adderall for adult ADHD. Stop! Sophia screamed, her voice echoing. But Frank continued. Interesting thing about that Adderall, he said. You filled it at 3 different pharmacies in the same week. Total 180 pills in 2 months. That's not medication. That's abuse. The room was dead silent, the air thick with shock. Ethan sank into his chair, his head in his hands. I stepped closer, my voice calm but unrelenting. So let me understand this, Sophia. The woman who just gave a speech about standards, who called me damaged goods for my past, who said I should be grateful to be included in civilized society, that woman is using prescription drugs illegally while paying actors to pretend to be her family. Sophia was shaking, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand, she whispered. I needed them. The pressure, the planning, it had to be perfect. Perfect, I said, stepping closer. You built your entire relationship with my son on lies. You've been high for most of your courtship, and you humiliated me for overcoming the same disease you're suffering from. It's not the same, she said, her voice barely audible. You're right, I said. It's not. I got help. I got clean. I built a life helping others recover. You hired actors and stole pills. Ethan looked up, his eyes red. Sophia, is this true? All of it. She couldn't speak, her tears ruining her makeup, her perfect gown now a costume. Then it happened. Her purse sitting on the head table tipped over, spilling dozens of pills across the white tablecloth. OxyContin, Percocet, Adderall, just as Frank had described. The room gasped. Cameras flashed, and the symbolism was undeniable, her secrets laid bare for all to see. Jesus Christ, Sophia, Ethan said, staring at the pills. You brought drugs to our wedding. I needed them, she sobbed. The stress, the anxiety. You needed them because you're an addict, I said quietly. Just like I was. But instead of getting help, you attacked me for being honest about my disease. Pastor Mark Johnson, who'd been silent near the altar, stepped forward. Sophia, he said gently, you need help. Real help. Not a wedding. Not more lies, but treatment. I don't need treatment, she said, scrambling to gather the pills, her hands shaking. I need everyone to mind their own business. This became everyone's business when you made that toast, I said, when you humiliated me for my recovery while hiding your own addiction. Sarah approached, her voice soft but firm. Sophia, I run an intervention program at Phoenix General. We can get you into treatment tonight if you're willing. I'm not going anywhere, Sophia snapped, stuffing pills back into her purse. This is my wedding day. No, Ethan said, his voice steady now. This was going to be our wedding day. Now it's the day I found out I don't know you at all. He pulled off his wedding ring, setting it on the table next to the scattered pills. The room held its breath. Ethan, wait! Sophia pleaded, reaching for him, but he was already walking away. His shoulders squared his steps, resolute. Frank stepped forward, handing Sophia a business card. I've filed my report with the Arizona State Board of Pharmacy. You'll hear from investigators within 48 hours. You need a lawyer. And treatment. Sophia looked around, her eyes wild, taking in the guests, some leaving, some snapping photos, others Googling prescription drug fraud penalties. This is all your fault, she hissed at me, her voice venomous. If you'd just minded your own business. If I'd minded my own business, I interrupted, my son, would have married someone living a lie. Someone who's sick and refuses to admit it. I walked to Ethan, who stood by the exit, his face a storm of heartbreak and clarity. Son, I said, my voice low, I'm sorry this happened. But I'm not sorry you know the truth. He looked at me, tears in his eyes. How did you know, Dad? 12 years of recovery, I said. You learned to spot the signs: anger, defensiveness, projection. She was accusing me of everything she was guilty of herself. He hugged me, a real hug, the kind we hadn't shared in months. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, he whispered. I'm sorry I let her treat you that way. You don't need to apologize for loving someone, I said, even when they don't deserve it. Behind us, Sophia was arguing with the wedding coordinator, her voice shrill as she demanded refunds. The remaining family members had vanished, the pills still scattered on the table like evidence at a crime scene. The reception had become a circus, guests whispering, phones flashing, the band unsure whether to play on. But for me, the chaos was a strange kind of clarity. The truth had burned through Sophia's illusion, and though it hurt, it was necessary. The Desert Ridge Country Club stood silent in the dawn light, its grandeur muted by the aftermath of the night before. The ballroom, once a stage for Sophia's glittering illusion, was now a ghost of itself. Tables littered with half-empty glasses, wilting roses drooping in their vases, a single pill bottle left on the head table like a forgotten prop. I stood outside, my breath visible in the cool Arizona morning, watching the cleaning crew sweep away the remnants of a wedding that never was. The chaos of last night's unraveling felt like a lifetime ago, but its echoes lingered in my chest, a mix of relief and sorrow. I'd exposed Sophia's lies, saved my son from a future built on deception, but the cost was heavy. Ethan's heartbreak, the public spectacle, the weight of a truth too raw to soften these, were the ashes of my victory. I drove home as the sun rose, the desert stretching wide and endless around me. My phone buzzed with notifications, but I ignored them. I needed quiet a moment to process what I'd done. 12 years of recovery had taught me that truth is a double-edged sword. It cuts through lies, but it leaves scars. I thought of Claire, her gentle voice in my memory. Protect him, Michael, even when it's hard. I'd kept that promise, but at what price? Ethan's face last night, pale and shattered as he set his wedding ring beside Sophia's spilled pills, haunted me. I'd saved him from a lie, but I couldn't shield him from the pain. By noon, the story had spread like wildfire. My phone lit up with messages from friends, colleagues, even clients at New Dawn recovery centers. Heard what happened at the wedding. You did the right thing. Sophia's on the news, prescription fraud investigation. Proud of you, Michael. That took guts. The local news had picked up the story, framing it as a dramatic wedding day expose. Scottsdale woman faces fraud charges after fake family revealed at wedding. I didn't read the articles. I didn't need to. The truth was out, and with it came consequences I hadn't anticipated. Sarah Voss met me at New Dawn's main office that afternoon, her manila folder now a thick dossier of evidence. She sat across from me in my office, the hum of group therapy sessions filtering through the walls. Sophia's been admitted to Desert Haven Treatment Center, she said, her voice steady but heavy. She went voluntarily last night after the reception fell apart. Her mother, her real mother, Patricia Morrison, called me this morning. She's flying in from Nevada to be with her. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of her words settling in. Her real mother, I repeated. So Patricia wasn't part of the act? No, Sarah said, sliding a document across my desk. Patricia's a retired school teacher, lives in Reno. No wealth, no real estate empire. Just a single mom who lost touch with Sophia after she moved to Arizona. Apparently, Sophia's been estranged from her for years, ashamed of her modest background. I nodded, the pieces clicking into place. Sophia's lies weren't just about impressing Ethan, they were about erasing her past, creating a persona that matched the life she thought she deserved. What about the pharmacy fraud? I asked. The Arizona State Board of Pharmacy is investigating, Sarah said. Frank filed his report, and they've already flagged 4 doctors and 7 pharmacies. Sophia could face felony charges up to 3 years if convicted. The FBI's also looking into S. Morrison Financial Services. They suspect money laundering, possibly tied to her prescription drug purchases. I stared out the window, watching a client, Marcus, walk across the courtyard, his head high after 6 months clean. And the actors? I asked. They're cooperating, Sarah said. They signed non-disclosure agreements with Sophia, but those don't hold up in criminal investigations. They've admitted to being hired for multiple events, not just the wedding. Apparently, Sophia used them to impress Ethan's colleagues, clients, even his friends, for months. The scope of her deception was staggering. Sophia hadn't just lied about her family, she'd built an entire alternate reality, a stage play with Ethan as the unwitting lead. I thought of her purse spilling pills across the table the moment her mask shattered. It wasn't triumph, I felt it was pity. Addiction is a thief stealing truth, dignity, relationships. I knew that better than anyone. But unlike Sophia, I'd faced my thief head on. She'd chosen to hide. That evening, Ethan came to my house, his face drawn, his eyes red from lack of sleep. We sat on the porch, the desert air cool and quiet, a bottle of sparkling water between us. I'm sorry, Dad, he said, his voice low. I should have listened to you. I should have seen the signs. You loved her, I said, my hand resting on his shoulder. Love makes us blind sometimes. I've been there. He shook his head, staring at the horizon. I thought she was perfect. The way she carried herself, the stories about her family, her confidence, it all seemed so real. That's what addiction does, I said. It builds a facade to hide the chaos. I saw it in myself years ago. I saw it in her. He looked at me, his eyes searching. How did you know, Dad? Not just about her family, but about her problem. I took a sip of water, the memory of my own dark days sharp in my mind. 12 years in recovery, Ethan. You learn to spot the tell's deflection, anger, shame projected onto others. She attacked my past because it mirrored hers. She couldn't face it, so she tried to make me feel small instead. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. I found a bottle of Oxy in her apartment last week. She said it was for migraines. I believed her. You wanted to, I said. That's not your fault. He leaned forward, his hands clasped. I'm joining an Al-Anon group tomorrow. I need to understand what I missed, how I let her pull me away from you. I felt a lump in my throat, pride and pain intertwined. That's a brave step, son. You're stronger than you know. We sat in silence for a while, the stars emerging above the desert. I thought of Claire, her laughter, her unwavering belief in us both. Ethan was hurting, but he was choosing to face it, to learn to grow. That was recovery in its truest form, not just sobriety, but the courage to confront hard truths. The next day, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered, expecting another reporter. Instead, a woman's voice, soft but weary, came through. Mr. Kane. This is Patricia Morrison, Sophia's mother. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Patricia, I said. I'm glad you called. I wanted to thank you, she said, her voice trembling, for what you did at the wedding. I know it wasn't easy, but it got Sophia into treatment. She's been struggling for years, hiding her addiction from me, from everyone. I thought I'd lost her. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. I'm sorry it had to happen that way, I said. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted the truth for my son. I know, she said, and I'm grateful. Sophia's in a dark place, but she's alive and she's getting help. That's more than I could have hoped for a month ago. We talked for a few minutes, two parents bound by the pain of watching our children struggle. Patricia told me about Sophia's childhood, her drive to escape their small-town life, her shame at their modest means. She thought money and status would fix her, Patricia said. But it only buried her deeper. I understand, I said. I've been there. Tell her there's a way out if she's willing to fight for it. I will, Patricia said. And Mr. Kane, don't let what she said at the wedding define you. You're a good man, a good father. Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. I walked to my study where Claire's photo sat on the mantel, her eyes steady and kind. I touched the frame, feeling the weight of the past 12 years. The relapses I'd avoided, the lives I'd helped save, the family I'd fought to keep. Sophia's words had stung, but they couldn't erase what I'd built. In the weeks that followed, the story took on a life of its own. Clients at New Dawn began sharing their own experiences of stigma, inspired by what they'd heard. Marcus, the young man I'd counseled, approached me after a group session, his eyes bright. I read about what you did, he said. You didn't let her shame you. That means something. It means we don't let our past define us, I said, clapping his shoulder. We define ourselves. The community response was overwhelming. I was invited to speak at a local forum on addiction and stigma, sharing my story alongside others who'd faced judgment for their recovery. The room was packed, faces young and old, some tearful, some angry, all united by the shared fight to be seen as more than their struggles. I told them about Sophia, not to vilify her, but to show how shame can twist even the brightest lives. Recovery isn't just about staying clean, I said. It's about living with dignity, refusing to let others make you feel less than you are. Ethan joined me at the forum, sitting in the front row, his presence a quiet strength. After he hugged me, his voice steady. I'm proud of you, Dad, he said, and I'm sorry I ever doubted you. You don't need to apologize, I said. You're here now. That's what matters. The FBI's investigation into S. Morrison Financial Services continued, uncovering a web of shell accounts and questionable transactions. Sophia's actors turned state's evidence detailing how she'd hired them for dozens of events to maintain her facade. She faced charges, but Desert Haven reported she was making progress in treatment, attending daily therapy, and beginning to confront her addiction. I didn't wish her ill. Addiction is a disease, not a crime. I hoped she'd find the strength I had all those years ago. One evening, as the sun set over the desert, Ethan and I sat in my backyard, the air warm and fragrant with creosote. We drank coffee, the kind Claire used to make, strong and black. I'm not going back to her, Ethan said, his voice firm. Not after the lies. I deserve better. You do, I said, my heart swelling. You deserve honesty. From others, from yourself. He nodded, his eyes on the horizon. I'm starting to understand what recovery really means, he said. It's not just about staying sober. It's about choosing who you let into your life. I smiled, the weight of the past weeks lifting. The desert stretched before us, vast and unyielding, a reminder of how far we'd come. I thought of Claire, of Jerry, of every client who'd trusted me to guide them through the dark. Recovery wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one we walked together step by step. I looked at Ethan, my son, his face lit by the fading light. Tell me something, I said. What's next for you? He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months. Work, Al-Anon, maybe a dog, he said, and spending more time with you. Good plan, I said, raising my coffee mug. To new beginnings. He clinked his mug against mine. To truth. As the stars emerged, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Sophia's lies had burned bright, but they'd crumbled under the weight of truth. I'd fought for my son, for my dignity, for the thousands of others who'd faced the same shame. And in that fight I'd found something stronger than anger or revenge, redemption. Not just for me, but for all of us who'd dared to rise from the ashes.